Good morning, everyone. It's November 17th, 2 weeks after the election, and we still have a lot of turmoil, but we are going to talk about goals and metrics for 2021 since we get closer and closer to the end of 2020 on a daily basis, and we still have a lot of opportunity. Many companies are putting together their goals and setting up for 2021, which is a great thing. I know a lot of us individually are going to be happy to see 2020 in the rearview mirror, but we still want to be able to look ahead to 2021 and make sure that we're adequately prepared. And now's the time to do that. So this is our biweekly dynamic dialogue webinar. We're going to continue those on the first and the third Tuesday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. That's a forum for sharing thoughts and ideas, questions, lessons learned about the COVID pandemic and beyond that. So we have one link that we're going to use from October through December. We've got a couple more meetings scheduled, and then we're going to break for a little bit, and then we'll go in, resume back in early 2021, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. So for 2021, again, a lot of us really just can't wait for 2020 to be over. We're over and done with this. We're tired of the pandemic. We're tired of the news. We're tired of the election that we thought would end on November 3rd. But it hasn't, and we still have some time to go. We still have 6 or 7 weeks. We've got holidays coming up, which I hope everyone is taking seriously about being careful during these times. But we need to start a strong, focused approach to 2021. The needs for the new year are becoming more and more obvious every day because we're getting more information about life as it's going to be. We're getting optimism from some vaccines that have recently been announced. And now is a really great time to look at 2020, how we got here, where we are, look at the changes that you had to make over the course of the year due to the pandemic, due to everything else that's been so chaotic, and look at where you started 2020, where you are now. Take a look at the accomplishments that you've made, the changes that you've made. Recognize that COVID is still going to be with us for a while. We're getting record numbers still in daily cases. Deaths are higher than they've been, except for the very early onset. And we don't know what's going to happen in the next few weeks, but there's not a lot of downturn that I've seen. So we do have the vaccines. The timing is not certain of those. And we're going to be able to move forward with these, but we have to still be very practical and pragmatic about the fact that we're going to have to deal with that. A lot of companies are releasing their overall goals for 2021, or they're in the process of putting those together and finalizing those. And it's very important that you make sure that you align with your stakeholders. And there's a typo there, but make sure you align with your stakeholders within the company without, um, and for personally, without a company in perspective. There's a few goal categories that I want to go over today, and I'm going to go over some categories of goals and talk to you about what you might want to do in terms of these categories, and then we'll look at some specific metrics that you can use. So cost is something that's always on everyone's mind when it comes to supply chains. We have a lot of economic instability. We've seen demand be very volatile throughout the course of the year, and that's going to continue. We still had a lot of unknowns in trade and tariff. There's been a big multi country trade agreement signed this week, or in the last 10 days. The US isn't a part of that, so we've been shut out of that a little bit. We may be able to still get back in. It's kind of unknown. And we've had tariffs. We don't know what that's going to mean going forward, if those tariffs are going to be changed, increased, decreased, or held. We've got the holidays coming up. So a week from Thursday is actually Thanksgiving, which is unreal to me. But with the holidays, there's work changes, there's extra buying that usually goes on. Black Friday, even though we've done different things with Black Friday this year and in recent years, we still expect that to be a hot time, although a lot of shopping today is being done online. So you're not going to see the traditional kind of Black Friday camping out or even starting on Thursday night, I don't believe. it's gonna be different. The holiday impacts really are going to be unknown. We don't know what people are doing. A lot of people are running out of unemployment insurance, and so that's putting a curb on things. There has been no additional stimulus package, and for a lot of people that's been very painful, and it's going to start to be even more painful if they don't do something about that very quickly. So there's a lot of unknowns. Companies, in spite of all of this, companies are still saying we need to reduce our prices, we need to reduce cost. And as we've talked about in these webinars before, that companies usually look at reduced prices. So they want to reduce the price that you're paying to the supplier for the goods and services that you're buying. Not a bad thing, but what I think you should do for 2021 is to consider more emphasis on a total cost approach rather than just reducing prices from suppliers. It's an important difference to look at, and it can make a big difference in the way you craft your metrics and in the way you craft success for 2021. Inventory is another area to really look at. This is a great time to look at your inventory strategies. What have you been doing? What have you done in the past? What's working? What's not? It's if you haven't done this as part of your business, you should really be looking to validate your lead times. Many companies have seen lead times from suppliers change. Many suppliers have had to change their lead times due to all kinds of aspects of the pandemic and all kinds of things. So it's very important that you look at this and see what you can do about that, and make sure that the ones you have in your systems are valid and still up to date. You want to review the shortages you've had over the course of the year. Where have you run out of products? Where have you had issues from suppliers? And then examine those root causes. Was it just a blip, or is that something that now is seeming to be more regular? This can be related to lead times, but it can also be related to the fact that your demand has changed, your suppliers have changed their shipping processes. It can be that the freight has been held up if you have things coming in from overseas, from Asia. That can be a reason that you've had shortages. So you really want to dig into what is the root cause in those shortages, and how does that affect what your inventory strategies are and are going to be into 2021. The other part of that equation is to really look at your excess and obsolete. What do you have too much of? What have you been building inventory on? If you can, compare your balances at the first of the year, mid-year, and now, and see, are those balances increasing, decreasing, or are they the same? And then what should they be doing? You don't have to look at every part in inventory, but you can look at the high dollar parts, and you can look at some of the high running parts, the parts that you use a lot of. If you have 15, 20 different part numbers, that might tell you something about what you want to do differently in 2021 to manage inventory. And those excess and obsolete ones, now is at the end of the year, if your fiscal year aligns, it's very good to write some of that inventory down if it's excess, and just keep that process for year over year. If it's obsolete, try to do something with it. Either write it off, try to dispose of it. But again, if you're going to dispose of it, make sure you dispose of it carefully. Recycle it if you can. If you can sell it somewhere else, you can do that. Reverse auctions. There's a lot of things you can do, but that's another area to really look at, because you want to be set up for the strongest year possible, the strongest launch of 2021. And then now is the time to set your year end goals for 2021. Look at where you are, where you want to be at the end of 2021, and set up inventory goals that are monthly or quarterly to figure out how you're going to get there. That may be, again, working on some of the excess and obsolete. It may be changing your inventory balances. Some companies have decided to not go as lean as they had been before, and that's a good thing to do sometimes, to be less lean. When that we found out during the pandemic, companies ran out of things. And maybe it's that you want to just look at the whole thing differently because your volumes have changed, your mix has changed, all of that. It also may be a function of where your suppliers are, whether they're here domestic, or they're overseas. And there's a lot of changes going, Brexit's going on, so that's going to affect the EU. We've got the Asia thing going on with all of the consternation about that. A lot of different things. So now's a good time to look at inventory. Delivery. This is when you want to look at your company needs, your policies around the buffers that you have. Many companies add a week, up to 2 weeks, some up to a month of buffer in their MRP system uh, in advance of when they actually need the parts delivered. So if you need the parts delivered on maybe December 9th, then you add 1 or 2 weeks and that says, oh, I need it on December 2nd, or maybe as early as November 25th, 2 weeks ahead. So that's what the need date goes out to the supplier. So then if the supplier is a little bit late, then they can absorb that. A week or two is fairly common. Some companies use more, and some companies really try to cut it down to the last day and maybe only put a 2 or 3 day pad on it. Some companies put no pads on that. So it depends on what you do, but this is a good time to look at that, to look at what your company needs based on what's happened in 2020. I know it's been a different year, but it's the most recent information we have, and it's the best predictor for what's going to happen at least in the next 3 to 6 months. So look at what's happened recently and use that actual data to adjust for what you want to do for the next 3 to 6 months. You can always change after that. You can always do a mid-year reset. It's also a good time to reset expectations with suppliers. So sometimes companies have suppliers who get a little bit lax on their deliveries, get comfortable with delivering partials, or don't worry too much if they're a week or so late because they know that you have that week or two buffer in your system, so they don't worry about it. Now's a good time to really sit down with those suppliers and say, look, this is what we need. Here's our delivery expectation. Be transparent about the buffers you use or don't use with your suppliers and tell them this is our policy. You can change your policy for 2021. You can reinforce the policy that you've had, or you can start from nothing. If you had no policy, now's a good time to set one. The other thing I will suggest that you look at is look at fill rate, look at perfect orders, look at different metrics from your suppliers. Have your suppliers tell you what their on time metrics are, both in deliveries to their customers across the board, including you, and from their suppliers. Then you can start to see, oh, here's what I'm seeing. Here's what my supplier is telling me. Are these matching? Are they disparate? Are they directly opposed? So are you measuring things the same way suppliers are measuring them? On-time delivery is a very important goal, but I've said many times it's difficult to measure because a supplier can do what they're supposed to do, put it on the dock, have it picked up on time, and then the freight carrier is the one that mismanages it or takes longer than expected. We're going into winter now, and we've had a lot of hurricane issues from parts of the South. So the supplier may have done things in good faith, but it may not have made it to the customer on time for forces they can't control. We're going into the winter where we have typically some snowstorms across the country, either in the Denver area, in the mountains, which causes slowdowns, or in the Northeast, or anywhere across the Midwest, you can have issues. So look at those things that you can control and say, how am I measuring this? And what is really the way I want to measure it going forward? And that's why sharing that with your supplier and having them share their metrics with you helps to close those gaps. So this is an important area. And I also don't have it on the slide, but I also reinforce, look at things like packaging, the quantities that you have per package, per pallet. Are they supposed to put it in this kind of pallet and they're not doing that? Are you getting loose boxes? Are you getting too many partials? And is the packaging correct? Is it as robust as you need? Are you having issues with that? And also look at your freight carriers. Maybe some of those need a nudge or some information on what they've been doing. The other thing that doesn't help companies record delivery correctly is if you have incoming inspection, because it may hit your dock on time, but if it doesn't get through your incoming process, then that can hold that up, and then your delivery date and your supplier's delivery date are not going to match. If you still have incoming inspection, that's an area where I encourage you, see what you can do in 2021 to get rid of it. You can't probably get rid of it by the first of the year, but you can put activities in place now that will help you phase out or reduce your incoming inspection activity over the course of 21. If you're still doing a lot of incoming inspection, you really have to ask yourself why. Why are my suppliers not doing this? Why are they not sending me in material with information that says they've done these checks and all of these parts have either been checked or statistically been checked, so I can have a certified lot that's hitting my dock rather than parts that I'm expected to go check. If you need to make some changes with your suppliers, now is a perfect time to go do that. Along with delivery goes responsiveness in a lot of ways. You want to really look at what are your customers now asking of your company that maybe they were asking a year ago, and maybe these are new. Maybe there's some of the requests that they had a year ago have dropped off. So, what are their requests, and then what are their requirements? Because there's a difference. That's the needs and the wants. The requirements are the needs, the requests are the wants. So, what is coming from your customers? Because you should be aware of that, how that affects your company, and then how you're going to share that with your suppliers. So look at the changes that you've experienced over the years, over the course of this year, the mix changes, the volume changes. What has happened to your business in regards to your customers and your suppliers? And how can you put a model forward for 2021 that's going to incorporate those changes made and the further changes that you expect as we go into 21, hopefully into full recovery and eventually beyond the pandemic? I've seen all kinds of pundits forecast different dates of when we will be, quote, back to normal. I've said before, I think we are not going back to normal, but when we will get into some area of stability and when things will be a better reflection of being able to move about without the fear of the pandemic and the constraints that are put on us by the pandemic. That some companies and some pundits are expressing that maybe mid to late next year, some into 2022, some beyond 2022. So, however that affects your business, whoever you listen to, as far as your industry, your company, the overall customer base, look at those things and incorporate that into your planning for 2021. You want to look at where you have push and pull models. So push models where you're pushing product out to customers, push models where suppliers are pushing product out into the marketplace to have available for you, and then pull models where you have customized and unique things that your customers want from you and customized unique parts that you need from your suppliers. So where are those? How does that work? Is that working? And can you go to more of a pull model to help manage that? And what would you need to do that? Again, if you can't do this immediately, and this is where you'd like to be next year, now is the time to say, these are my goals for next year. Here's how I see myself getting from this year to the end of next year. And then you really have to examine all of your suppliers. How have they been through the course of the year? Have they been reliable? Were they reliable before? Are they as reliable as they were before the pandemic? Some companies are even more reliable and more dependable than they were before. Some companies sadly are not. And if you have suppliers whose reliability and dependability has eroded, you need to address that. Talk to them, see if they can fix that performance. If they can't fix that performance, then you need to decide what you're going to do as a company to move forward with that relationship or not. If you think that supplier is at risk, may not be around at the end of next year, now is a good time to be putting some mitigation strategies in place and maybe even looking for additional suppliers. This is really keenly important when you have single and sole source suppliers, but really any supplier where you've seen very erratic or very much deterioration of the performance over the course of the year, you need to hone in on that and make sure that you are prepared for what might happen. Quality is another whole category, another thing you can spend lots and lots of time on. Quality as a category is very important because you need quality parts from your suppliers. But this is a good time again to say what quality is actually required. We know that we all want perfect parts, but is perfect really required? And by that, I don't mean that they should all be usable, but what are your tolerance levels? What are your hot buttons of quality where things are being rejected, where you're finding defects? So what are the things that you maybe can loosen up, and what are the things that maybe you need to tighten up, and what are the things that you've done through your experience to prove these are the right tolerances, these are the right parameters, this is the right definition of quality. Some companies find that they haven't defined quality very comprehensively to their suppliers. And if you have suppliers in that kind of situation, then you want to take this time and make sure that you do spell out very clearly, these are my expectations of quality. If you haven't used statistical controls and ask your suppliers to do some of that, that's a good thing to investigate. Look at that. One of the first things you want to do is say, what has my performance been to date in 2020? What has my supplier's performance been to that? And what kind of quality do I have internally as well? So look at your performance, look at the requirements that you have, and where are the gaps? Where are you not getting the required level of quality that you really need for your business? And then ask yourself, how am I measuring that? Or is there a better way to measure that? Or am I not measuring that, but I have a sinking feeling that my quality is not where it needs to be for these reasons? So, what are you measuring? How are you measuring that? And look at that and make sure you have the right way. Another thing is, how do your suppliers get information on how you're assessing their performance? So, for example, if you have defects, if you have rework, how is that information communicated to your supplier? Is it timely? Is it comprehensive? Do they understand the impact that their quality or their poor quality is having on your business? If not, why not? And if not, how can you start to do that for them so that they have a real feel for what's going on with your company? If they find out after the fact that you rejected lots or that you had some line defects that caused you a lot of stops and starts on your line, then if they find out 5 weeks later, there's not much they can do except, oh, sorry. But if they find out today and they feel some of that pain, and you're asking them to share in the solution for that, and if not share in the solution, at least be aware that this is what happened, then you're not doing your service to manage your suppliers correctly and completely. They need to know very quickly what's happening, what you're seeing from their parts, so they can make changes in their line, they can make adjustments, and they can be more responsive to help you resolve that and improve the overall quality. Again, this is a great time to reset expectations. It's the end of a year. We got a new year coming. It's the pandemic. You've had to look at your business. Everything is more keen today. Everything is more highlighted. Everything is on steroids. And so the quality that you received from them, if it's not acceptable, it's very important that you sit down now and let them know this cannot continue into 2021. Put a set of activities together, put an owner from it internally, and have them work with the supplier to figure out what the supplier can do better, more, whatever, to improve their performance. And if you have suppliers that have performed very well throughout the year with lots of changes and lots of up and downs, and their quality is still very high, this goes for their delivery and responsiveness and everything else, then this is the time that you want to reward them. You want to tell them thank you. You want to acknowledge what they've done and how they've helped you through the course of the year, because this is the time when it's really important that you do that. You can do that through supplier certificates. You can do that on Zoom calls. You can send them a basket of cookies or muffins or whatever with a thank you to you and your team. It's more difficult now when people aren't in the office, but you can do things and you can offer, hey, when you're back in the office, let us know and we'll send you lunch. We'll send you pizza. We'll send you this. Or thank you notes. And handwritten thank you notes are very, very much appreciated. If you have addresses where you can send things to people, that's a great thing. Nowadays, that's difficult because people are working from home and they don't want to give you their home address, and you don't want to send things to the office because it won't get to them. Then sit down and write a nice personal email. It doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be more than about 3 sentences. If you just acknowledge what they've done for you and for your company and thank them personally, and make sure they understand this is not something that you just wrote and then copied and pasted 20 times to the 20 suppliers that you're dealing with. Make it personal, make it about what the work you've done is. Again, it doesn't really take a lot of time. You can do it kind of a template format thing, but it will give you a chance to really review the performance, and it will give them a chance to be acknowledged for the things that they have done for you. And believe it or not, you can send a note and say, thank you, you've done all of these things very well. And you can still pick up the phone or write another email and say, we're moving forward in this direction and we need this performance in this area to improve. So it's not really slapping the hand that feeds you if you tell them that they've been great at quality and they've been great at responsiveness, but you can say, we really need help with delivery, or we really need help with the cost management, because even though you've done great at this, we still need some help here. Don't put it in the same email because then it kind of contradicts itself. So acknowledge them for what they do well. And you don't have to send it in the same week, even. You can send one week and the other the next week. And now's a good time to enlist their help. If you sent them something that said you did great on quality and delivery, and then you say, hey, we need to set a meeting to talk about cost because this is our real pain point for 2021. And we'd like to collaborate with you and see how we can work on this together going forward so that we end 2021 stronger than we started. So you can do a lot of different things that are still going to set yourself up for success. In in terms of quality, look at what you're measuring. Look at the defects, look at the rejects that you have, how many disruptions you've had due to quality. You have disruptions due to inventory shortages, whatever the disruptions are for, make sure you categorize those correctly. Look at the scrap and the rework you have. And scrap and rework, you want to look at both time involved and the material costs. Some companies really say, oh, we did this much rework, but okay, what's the material portion of that? Did you lose some parts in there? Did you have to add parts? Did you have to buy other parts in order to rework something that wasn't done correctly? Did you have to spend time redesigning something or a fixture or whatever to do the rework and make sure that you didn't scrap things? Consider all of that and make sure that you capture that so that you have a baseline to go forward. And if you do that, share that with your supplier. Hey, by the way, we talked to you about this, but this is really what we've figured out the impact to us was. We need to improve this for 2021. Let's talk about how we can do that. Reliability is another area, not only doing things well, but doing it consistently. And then also look at their warranty results. What are the things that you've seen from your customers coming back in terms of your suppliers? That's important information to look at, to incorporate into your metrics, and to share with your suppliers. Another area that's really important, I think, that companies are looking at right now is business fit. So where are your suppliers located? Are they in the right locations for you? Are you considering moving? Are you concerned about the locations where suppliers are? Why are you concerned? What can you do about that? If you consider that a risk or a detriment, how can you change that dynamic a little bit? What are their lead times? Again, numbers of companies are telling me that they have experienced significant changes and almost all increases in lead times. So what does that mean to your company? How can you work on that? Inventory levels and locations. I talked about inventory before, but now I'm going to talk about it in terms of where does your supplier keep their inventory? Do they keep inventory for you? What are the levels of inventory they carry? Where are those locations? I know a lot of companies ask suppliers to consolidate inventory, or suppliers want to consolidate inventory for their customers. Is that working? Is that not? If it isn't, then you need to be clear about why that's not working. If it is working, then you want to acknowledge that, figure out where you can leverage that for other parts or maybe other suppliers. How is their communication with you, and how is your communication with them? If this is an area where you don't feel like you're actually being heard, or you don't feel that their communication is frequent enough, or comprehensive enough, or then talk about that and bring that out. Make sure you ask about supplier financials. This is a very important area to look at. And end of year, first of year is a very logical time for companies to say, hey, we're doing a risk assessment on our supply base. One of the things we need to know is, what are some of the financials in your company? How are you doing? We hope you've done well through this pandemic, or at least managed, but we'd like to know that you're going to be around next year. So we need some information. And then look at your leverage and the level of influence you have with the supplier. Are you the one that tells them everything and you have all of the influence and leverage? Is it a big company? You're the big company, they're the small company, or is it the other way around, where no matter your size, you're dealing with a very big company and they have more leverage and influence than you do? What can you do about that? How can you get more on parity, and how can you work more together to improve that imbalance, to lessen that leverage or influence that either party has? Because sometimes you are the big company, but you don't want to have all that influence and leverage over your supplier. You want them to be more responsible and them to take ownership of things. You don't want to have to do all of that yourself. So where are you on that fit, and where do you want to be? So look at that very carefully now, and then figure out how you can put some metrics around to measure that and change that dynamic for next year. Other areas that are very important are sustainability. A lot of companies are looking at sustainability. My next webinar is going to be on circular supply chains, which is kind of a new concept. And I know some companies say, well, we can't do that. And I say, well, maybe you can't do it immediately, but you can get there and you can move in that direction. And I'm seeing a lot of interesting things that companies are doing. So make sure you tune in in 2 weeks for that. But sustainability, making sure they have good practices. They're taking care of the planet. Again, I'm not talking about climate change necessarily. You can argue about climate change, or you can pay attention to different scientists or different schools of thought, but we are talking about the set of finite resources we have on the planet and how we can manage those most efficiently, effectively, and cost wise for our companies. That's what we're trying to do. Diversity and inclusiveness, a huge topic on a lot of people's plates. A lot of companies are adopting new initiatives for diversity and inclusiveness for 2021 and beyond. If your company is doing that, make sure you're sharing that with your suppliers. Make sure you're looking at how they do that, and make sure you have an alignment on values in some of these areas. If your company and your suppliers are not aligned on values, that can cause real problems. So take a look at what your company is doing, what your customers are doing, and then what do you need from your suppliers. Don't be afraid to add things to your supplier's plate, because they need to know what you need for them to continue to be a supplier, for that relationship to continue to be a good balance, symbiotic, and successful for both. I'm sure many companies have other initiatives, other types of categories. Look at your company, your industry, your business. What else is a goal that you need to have? So think about what those goals need to be. Boil that down into the top few, and then figure out how you're going to capture that. So now let's take a look at some metrics. In supply chain and in procurement, especially purchasing, one of the things we really look at is assurance of supply. And that's what procurement is tasked to do. That is job number one, is make sure you get parts in here. And you've got to have not only parts, but the right parts in the right condition, at the right time, in the right place, at the right cost. All of those things are what we do in procurement, what we do as part of the supply chain organization. And so that assurance of supply looks at a lot of different things. How long does it take you to convert requisitions to purchase orders? That cycle time is a really good metric to look at. Does it take a couple of days or does it take a couple of weeks? And a lot of companies have very much both, because things that are off the shelf, things that you can just go buy, you can convert those recs fairly quickly. If you have to go out for an RFI, information, proposals, quotes, bids, whatever you have to do, that takes longer. So you might look at that in two different buckets. Here's my things that I'm buying that are off the shelf that I can turn those recs very quickly. And here's all the custom things that I'm buying, and those recs take longer to process. So if you don't have goals and you don't have metrics for that, then this is a great time to instigate that, implement that, start that for your company so that you can track that. The backlog too, how many requisitions are open by buyer. Some are very quick to turn around, and others get a heavier backlog because it takes longer to convert those. If you're having to go out for a lot of specific, unique bids on things, then those requisitions are going to sit for longer and they're going to be a higher backlog. But if that's not an area that you've looked at before, look at that as a metric to measure what is the backlog by buyer. You don't have to do that on a daily basis, but that's something that you can generally do on a weekly basis. And then look at that over the course of a month, a quarter, and see, is that getting better? Is it getting worse? It helps you justify additional people. It helps you restructure the work so that you don't have one person who's getting all the backlog. It helps you have a different understanding of how much work you're processing. Then you want to look at things like how many things that you're processing are hard orders versus estimates or bids. So I've worked in companies that do a lot of estimating, and they have to get a lot of quotes for their supplier, for their customers. And so when you're doing that, you're doing a lot of estimating. You're getting a lot of quotes just for not to buy exactly, or not to buy at this time, but if you get the contract somewhere down the line, then you might buy that. But usually it's so much time there that you're going to have to get another quote when you actually get the contract to update that. So you're doing a lot of work extra. So what is the amount that you're doing for real orders, real work that you have in, and that parts that you need now or services? And then what are you doing to help the estimating department? Both valuable tasks, both need to be done. But if you look at what the balance is, that can give you some insights into your business too, and how you're going to manage that. You want to look at your RFX processes. I use the X for information, proposals, bids, quotes, whatever you're asking for, your request for that. Are your processes robust? Are you getting those in comprehensive ways? Are you getting information that you need? Many companies are using this at a time, especially at the end of the year or the beginning of the year, to add some supplier surveys on there, to ask for certifications of insurance, to do surveys and risk assessments and any number of things. If you can do that, then that's a great thing to do to add on that. That gives the supplier a little more incentive than just getting, oh, here's my year-end survey from them, I'll get to it eventually. Oh, I have to turn this back as part of this RFQ, I might as well get it done. So how long does it, what are your processes for that? How long does it take you to issue those? And then what is your response rate? Is it what you expect? Do you have some laggard suppliers who are taking much longer than others? Do you have so many um, requests out that you're just getting inundated with those? Do you have suppliers that do it a little too quickly, that you think they're maybe not doing thorough jobs of estimating your job correctly? And they might come back, and if they do get the bid, they may come back and say, well, I didn't see that, I didn't quote that, so I can't do it for this. So there's a lot of different areas in there. Look at your purchase orders. Look at, how the acceptance rates. Do you need that? Are you having suppliers who are dropping the ball? Are you having errors in your purchase orders? How much volume you have by buyer, in either in terms of part numbers or PO numbers or dollars or number of suppliers, or. Look at what you're doing in terms of purchase orders and figure out if that's balanced within your organization, if you need to do some tweaking, or even if you just want to change from a commodity category model to a project model or a product model. If there's things that you need to do, this is a good time to do that. And then always look at inventory turns. That's a good metric to count. Inventory turns is cost of goods sold divided by the average inventory balance. You want to look at that on a monthly, quarterly basis and say, where am I and where does that, where do I want that to be in terms of next year's goals? If you haven't done this before and you're interested in this metric, go see somebody in finance. If you have a controller, if you have a CFO, go talk to them about inventory turns and see how you could implement this kind of metric. Cost reduction, as I said, companies always are going to pound on cost reductions. Everybody's going to have cost reduction goals for next year. So look at these metrics. Price reduction is probably going to be there. How much negotiation can you do? How much changing of prices can you do? Good stuff to do. But also look at things that you're saving. Look at what you can do to change processes so you can save time. Look at things so you can save the number of things that you're doing. Either you can consolidate purchase orders and issue fewer purchase orders. If you can do something with your requisitions and change that, maybe buy on a quarterly basis instead of a monthly basis. If you can look at all the resources, how many people you have, how much time they spend in meetings, how much time they spend doing different tasks, how you can manage those resources better. You have budget, you have time, you have numbers of people, you have tasks. How can you manage all of that? Can you do something different with your freight? What are the indirect costs that have been hitting? Companies often don't pay as much attention to these indirect costs, but if you can make savings there, those savings will translate to the bottom line. So if you can save money on indirect costs, then go look for those savings and make sure you record those. Look at the packaging. Can that be changed? Can that be the cost reduced there? Can that be done more quickly? Can you use reusable packing or maybe some better recyclable materials? All of that can help. The number of suppliers that you manage overall, and then how much are you reusing, recycling versus going to waste? That's another area. And I'm going to talk more about that in circular supply chains, but that will also reduce the cost. So if you can capture any of these areas, then this is good to throw into your metrics for next year. And then cost avoidance. I know this is a category a lot of companies don't want to spend time on because they say it doesn't show up on the bottom line. But I have to be honest and say a lot of the price reductions that companies track diligently, doesn't show up on the bottom line either because it's not tracked the same way. And it's usually when you do that, you usually say, oh, I just reduced this $1 and I'm going to buy 10,000 in the next year. So I count a $10,000 cost reduction, but it's not on the bottom line because you haven't bought those 10,000 yet. And you won't really see that until the end of next year. So they don't really match up anyway. So cost avoidance is really a good thing to track. And that means that you avoided having to increase a price. You came up with an alternate solution. You did whatever so that you didn't increase the cost to your company for anything, whether that's indirect money like in tooling, whether that's in an actual unit cost price, whether that's in resources or any number of areas where you have spent. And then you can look at a lot of different ratios, how many suppliers per buyer, how many POs per buyer, how many dollars per buyer are you managing, or how many, per supplier, whatever the ratio is. Look at some of those things to say, how can I manage this? And how is that going to reduce the cost that I have to do things? Another thing you want to look at is the price volatility from your suppliers. So metrics from suppliers, you want to say, how often are you changing the prices? How much are you changing prices? Why are you changing prices? All of those things. You want to look at, are they charging you for changing mixed quantities, schedule, delivery dates? So yeah, I want you to bring that in. Do I have to pay an expedite charge? Yeah, I want you to hold that, push that out a month. And sometimes suppliers come back and say, okay, well, we can do that, but you're going to have to pay us this much money for doing that. So are you having to pay for that? A nickel and dime thing, as I say. And then are they sharing cost models? If your suppliers aren't sharing cost models, ask for those. They don't have to get into all the gory detail. They just need to show you how much is labor, how much is material, how much is overhead, and that can include the SG&A and the profit and all of that. If you can get them to break that down a little bit, that's good. But in terms of labor, you want to see labor dollars and you want to see labor hours, so that you can kind of figure that out. And then look at what the labor rates are. So, because we're looking at things like going to a higher minimum wage nationally. We've done that in California, and it's impacted our businesses. If they want to change the national minimum wage labor, that could affect your business. And you want to look at that. And what is that going to do to us going forward? So understand what that is. Again, you want to look at how financially stable your suppliers are. This is an area of big consternation for a lot of companies, and maybe it's not. If it's not for you, maybe it should be, because you want to know how they're doing. If they won't give you balance sheets and they won't give you annual reports like public companies have to make available, then you can ask for ratios. You can ask for things like debt to equity, which is just that. How much debt do they have? How much ratio, how much equity do they have? Tell me what the ratio is. They don't have to give you those exact numbers. They can tell you it's a dollar of debt for every $5 of equity or whatever. And they can give you something that tells you, hey, what is this? If they have $3 of debt for every dollar of equity, that's not so good. So it starts to give you a framework for that. Working capital ratio is defined as current assets over current liabilities. This helps you look at, oh, can this company pay their debts within about a year? So what's their current assets divided by their current liabilities? Again, you can get even a percentage of that. You don't need the numerator and the denominator, but if you can get those, or you can get those shrunk down, like I say, a 3 to 1 or whatever, that really helps you understand how well that company's doing. And if they are well run and they're financially sound, they really shouldn't hesitate to give you some of this information. If they're not doing so well, that's probably when they're going to balk about giving you even some of these ratios. You want to look at return on equity or maybe return on assets, whatever your company feels is most valuable to them. So for the equity they have, what is their return on that? For the assets they have, what is the return? And the return is the revenue. It's the gross revenue, net revenue. You can define that in some different ways. If you don't have these or know about these, talk to your finance people. They'll help you with these. Current ratios, quick ratios. Again, current assets divided by current liabilities. And then current assets minus inventory over current liabilities. That's the quick ratio. This tells you how they can pay back their debts and what their financial position is. Inventory, you want to look at disruptions, inventory turns, excess, obsolete, aging, days of supply, any numbers of things that you can look at. So if you haven't looked at these metrics, take a look, see what might apply to your business. For delivery, if you can't really measure a lot of things because of the dichotomy between when it's shipped and when you get it actually in your inventory, look at things like perfect orders. Companies do this for outbound, but you can also do this for inbound. So perfect orders are those that are shipped, no errors, the quantity is perfect, the perfect condition in terms of packaging, freight, all of that. Are you getting that? And you can manage this on an exception basis. So if it's not perfect, that's when you want to record it. If it is perfect, then good, that's great. Then you don't have to count it. So you can do a lot of these things on exception. Packaging document errors that can delay things getting into your inventory, so that you might have shortages and you might not get it to your line in time because of that. You can look at your parameters. Many companies use 3 days early, no days late, whatever works for you, but make sure that you're consistent about that and your suppliers are keenly aware of that. And then you can look at fill rate, which is the actual order quantity versus the ordered quantity. And you can use that by dollars, by volumes, by numbers of SKUs, by whatever makes sense to your business. But define it consistently and apply it. Quality disruptions, defects per million, defects per order, defects per lot, rejected lots, however you want to measure that. a lot of companies don't want to do the calculations for defects per million, and that's fine. But if you had 3 lots received, or if you received 650 parts, you can say defects per 650 parts. That's fine. But what you want to do is be consistent there, because one defect per 650 parts is way different than 1,000 defects per 10,000 parts. So you want to make sure that you've got a numerator and a denominator, and you're really looking at that relative, so you can compare suppliers, you can compare lots, parts, whatever. And then scrap and rework, again, hours and dollars both matter. Responsiveness, this is an area that's more of a subjective metric, but you know what? It's okay to have some that are objective, that you're really measuring things, and others that you're giving an assessment as some of it or part of it. Then complete and timely communication. So if your suppliers are not answering within 24 hours or acknowledging that you requested something, then they should be asked to do that. And if they repetitively don't respond, then you want to count that and tell them, this is what we're looking for. We're looking at responses within 24 hours. And that response can be just an acknowledgement. Hey, I got your message yesterday. I haven't had time to get it, but I'll get back to you in the next 24 hours, 2 days, 3 days, whatever it is. Um, how they communicate and the effectiveness of that. I know there are many people of a certain age that tend to text more. Some people avoid the phone, some people prefer email, but what are they doing? What type of it is, and how effective is it? I talked to a group of high school students yesterday, and they asked about communication. And I said, well, first of all, texting is not a two-way communication. It is one way, and it's not really full-on communication if it's not a send and a receive and an acknowledgement of understanding. So that's what you're trying to get to with communication. So you can text your mother and say, hey, I'm caught in traffic, I'm going to be home late, which is really, again, not communication as a two-way thing. It's just letting her know that, giving a one-way sided thing. And communication also involves listening. So how is that working with your suppliers? If it's not, let them know, and let them know how and why it's not, so that they can change that. Look at how they can change, how quickly they can change to request a change in mix or volume or schedule. So any of those kinds of things. If they are unwilling to do that, then that's not very responsive, and you need that. But it matters how quickly, and it matters how much, the magnitude of that. And then I always say, you want to have a proper sense of urgency. You want to really know what is important and what is just, hey, when you get around to it, would you let me know about this? Or can you give me an update this week about ABC? That's fine. As long as I get it by Thursday, it's good. Or, hey, I need to know this now, so please call me back today and let me know that you at least got this and you're working on it, because I got to get an answer to somebody. Other metrics that are, again, if you haven't included these are important initiatives in your company. These are important values in your company. Look at sustainability. How well is the supplier doing their recycling, their reuse? What are their sustainability initiatives? How are they incorporating this into their business and changing their business to match yours to be at a certain level of sustainability? Health and health prevention, um, wellness kinds of things. This is another metric that I'm seeing companies add with their suppliers. Do you have health uh, benefits? Do you have wellness benefits? Are you offering employees access to gyms, to wellness activities, to smoking cessation things, weight loss programs, all of those kinds of things? Do you do that? What kinds of precautions are you taking for COVID? If your supplier is not doing the same as you and your company is not in line with that, you need to know that, and you need to let them know, hey, this is what we are expecting of us and our workplace, and we expect you to do the same thing. They can choose to do that or not, but you need to know where that differential is. And then compliance. So we see a lot of people say, I know that they are telling us to do this, but we are not doing that. So if you are in that situation, then you're not complying with local and state um, laws, guidelines, whatever, then that's a big deal. You need to understand where your suppliers are so that you include that as part of your supplier management. Diversity, again, how are your suppliers using diverse suppliers, small minority businesses? What internal measures do they have? Initiatives do they have? Are they aligned with your company on values for this? So they actually are considering this to be an important initiative, or are they ignoring this entirely? Again, what does your company need? What do you need of your suppliers? So 2020 has been a roller coaster. And what I know for sure is there's a better way to start 2021 using some of these goals and metrics and rolling them out to internal stakeholders and key suppliers than just expecting everything to be better when we all toast on midnight on December 31st. So if you've changed your original goals from 2020, if your suppliers have, be aware of that. Take a look at that. How has that changed? What does that mean for 2021? Look at where your year-to-date results are. They can be very enlightening. You can learn a lot by looking at your early goals, your year-to-date results, and say, okay, what am I going to do for 2021? You have a pretty good idea of where you're going to be starting from because it's in about 6 weeks, but where you end can be a lot of different places. So where do you want this next year to end? Goals are really great, but you can have really good goals. And if you don't know how to measure your progress, you have no idea if you're going to make those goals or not. So get the goals, but also get the metrics so that you can do that. Make sure you take an honest baseline of where you are sometime between now and the end of the year. Pick your metrics and develop strategies. And what I would encourage you to do is to pick one new different metric and incorporate that. If you can do a couple, that's great. But if you can only do one change, what is the most important one for your company to change and do that going forward? So as I said, we're going to talk about circular supply chains on the 1st of December. I'm going to talk about the path forward for supply chain professionals in terms of credentials, education, requirements, hiring, that kind of thing on the 15th. And then we're going to take a break until 1/5. So then we'll start back. And on January 5th, I'm going to talk about launching 2021 strong for your supply chains. We're going to keep this program free bi-weekly, first and third Tuesdays, um, all through December, the 2 dates there into 2021. If you want to talk more about this, you can always do call with Jane. I've got a workshop called The New Normal that I'd like to start on December 7th. I need a few more people signed up. So if you're interested, please go to my website and check that out. And I've got CPSM exam number 2 starting in January. So if you haven't got a certification and you want one, 2021 is a great year to get it. So I'm going to leave you with this. Never tolerate poor performance in yourself or others. Again, set at least one aggressive goal for 2021. That can be personal and or professional. Decide how you're going to measure it, how frequently you're going to measure it. Take a good hard look at where you are now and where you want to be at this time next year. Set some incremental goals on a monthly or quarterly basis so you can really track your progress and you don't get to the third quarter next year and say, oh, I haven't really done anything about this. Include some thoughts and ideas on how you can celebrate the progress of making your goals and reward yourself, your team, and your suppliers. It's been a really tough year for a lot of us, but we have the chance to start anew in 2021. Regardless of when your fiscal year starts, you can still start 2021 as a new calendar year and do some reset and renew focus for your organization. Planning by itself is often really a cathartic exercise. And you can make it a creative process and collaborate with your key stakeholders. Align with the higher goals from your company, or if you're looking at personal things, your personal goals with the stakeholders in your life. Be grateful for the lessons we've learned in 2020 and the opportunities that we have ahead. Set high standards for yourself and others, and I wish you all profound success and know that I'm available to support you and your team as required. So I apologize for going over a couple minutes. I wish you a great Thanksgiving holiday, and I hope to see you all on December 1st.